Talk Radio. You're in to all things music.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to the show, and thanks for tuning in. I want to say a quick thank you to my guest on last week's episode, Grammy-nominated platinum-selling artist Dave Koz. If you didn't get to hear it, you can listen to all of our episodes at entertalkradio.com/makingit or download our app and take us with you. Also, be sure to tune in next week to hear my conversation with Academy Award-nominated songwriter, singer, actor Stephen Bishop. I'd like to take a moment to also thank the companies that help me sound my best, whether I'm performing live or in the studio recording and producing music. Blue Microphones, Taylor Guitars, Duesenberg Guitars, Seymour Duncan Pickups, Mesa Boogie Amps, D'Addario Strings and Planet Waves, Motu Digital Performer, IK Multimedia, Fishman Acoustic Amps, and Exotic Effects. So often I get asked questions about the creative process, so I created this show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the music business. You're really in for a treat as I've invited my friends, some of the best and brightest in the business, to share their stories on how they have influenced the music that has shaped our lives. I guarantee you're going to love it. So let's get started. My guest today is international recording artist Charlie Fox. Charles Fox was born and raised in New York City, graduated from the High School of Music and Art, and continued his formal musical education and composition studies with Nadia Boulanger in Paris. He studied jazz piano with Lenny Tristano and electronic music with Vladimir Ussachevsky at Columbia University. He began his career playing the piano, composing and arranging for such salsa legends as Ray Barretto, Joe Quijano and Tito Puente, as well as writing theme music and arrangements for Skitch Henderson and the Tonight Show Orchestra. Charles has composed music for hundreds of songs for records, motion pictures, and television. Among the many legendary and diverse recording artists who have recorded his songs are Roberta Flack, Sarah Vaughan, Barry Manilow, Jim Croce, Fred Astaire, Luther Vandross, Johnny Cash, Lena Horne, George Shearing, the Boston Pops, Jack Jones, Tito Puente, Goldie Hawn, Carly Simon, Johnny Mathis, Shirley Bassey, Crystal Gayle, Lori Lieberman, Sergio Mendes, Maureen McGovern, Olivia Newton John, Lauryn Hill, and Ice-T. Among his works for theater, in collaboration with lyricist Norman Gimbel, are The 11th and A Midsummer Night's Dream. In collaboration with Hal David, he has composed the musicals The Chosen and The Turning Point. Other song collaborators include Paul Williams, Bob Crewe, David Zippel, Sammy Kahn, Carly Simon, Carol Bayer Sager, and our friends Marilyn and Alan Bergman. He has composed the musical scores for over 100 motion pictures and television films, including Barbarella, 9 to 5, Goodbye Columbus, and Foul Play, for which he received one of his 2 Academy Award nominations. The other was for the film The Other Side of the Mountain. Among his popular songs are Ready to Take a Chance Again, I Got a Name, and Killing Me Softly with his song, for which he received the Grammy Award for Best Song of the Year. His TV shows and theme songs include The Love Boat, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Wonder Woman, The Paper Chase, Wide World of Sports, Monday Night Football, and Love American Style, for which he received 2 Emmy Awards. Charles was inducted into the Songwriter Hall of Fame in 2004. He was awarded Lifetime Achievement Awards for the Society of Composers and Lyricists and BMI, and is a governor of the Academy Motion Pictures Arts and Science. Please welcome my guest, Charlie Fox. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Nice to be here with you, Terry.
Well, actually, it's nice to be here with you in your studio. That's a treat for me to be.
I'm happy to welcome you, and I look forward to the time we're going to spend together.
Yeah, thank you. I want to start off by reading a quote of yours about composing music. I love the process of writing music. That's where it's really most exciting. I look forward to that first performance, the hearing of the music I've written, whether it be for film or television or in a concert hall. After that, it becomes part of the world out there. I don't quite have the same attachment to it that I did when I'm sitting in my room, this room, alone and writing it. Can you elaborate on that?
Do you know, nothing has really changed in my life with regard to that statement since I was a young student. As you mentioned before, I studied Nadia Boulanger in Paris for 2 years. And I was thinking about having a career in classical music. My only hope,
as a pianist or a composer?
No, as a composer.
Right.
Yeah. I never dreamed about a classical career as a pianist, frankly. I played piano, of course. But no, I wanted to write music. And when I had my very first lesson with Nadia Boulanger, who I always say to this day, she gave me a whole life in music.
Yeah.
And I realized that this is what I wanted to spend my life doing. And as far as the statement you made that I said, apparently, nothing has changed. My real pleasure is in writing the music, discovering the music, waking up and finding things I didn't know the day before about music, developing my music, going places I never thought. And I only really look forward to the day of hearing it played and performed. And I've had the good fortune of it played by orchestras. You know, I myself have conducted my own music in many orchestras around the world. At the piano with band singers. But the real pleasure is in discovering the notes I didn't know I had the day before.
Right.
And along the way, by the way, getting rid of the bad ones.
Right.
You know, that goes with it. So really, I have to be honest with you, it's wonderful to hear your records on the radio. It's have great singers performing great orchestras, and getting acclaim for it is the cherry on, you know, the icing on the top.
Right.
But the real pleasure when it comes down to it, is sitting at my desk or at my piano, and letting the music speak to me, and that's where I get excited.
Right.
Yeah.
When you write, I'm asking as a fellow composer, do you? Part of the magic of it is when the music reveals itself to you. Is that part of your experience? This, you know, seeing what comes up when you sit down to write?
Yes. I mean, it's, you know, we who write music face blank pages.
Right.
That's what we do. We wake up in the morning and find a blank page staring at us and say, now what I'm going to do, you know? However, once you get into a project, for me, the most difficult time is getting into a project.
Starting.
Starting.
Right.
I'm a slow starter. I don't know. Of course, in my career, I haven't had time to slow start.
Right.
Because I go from picture to picture, from show
it's kind
to
of
show,
ironic.
and try to write songs for someone in the meantime and develop a project, musical with some, you know, I have no time really.
Yeah.
But at the time it's starting up, is gearing up for the project, getting into it. I will tell you that when I wrote my first ballet for the San Francisco Ballet Company called The Song for Dead Warriors, Michael Smion, who was my collaborator all those years in the two ballets I did together, he was the director of the San Francisco Ballet Company and commissioned me to write this ballet. So we're going to do a work for the bicentennial, the United States, for 1976. And he came to me to do something with Americana. Anyway, his idea was to write about the experience of the Native Americans. And so we ended up with a ballet called The Song for Dead Warriors. But I'll tell you that before I wrote a note of music, I immersed myself in that world. I read books on the American Indians. I went to meetings of the American Indian movement. Russell Means was the head of it then. We traveled to Montana. We spent a weekend on a reservation, the Flathead Indian Reservation, Missoula, Montana. And when I sat down to write music, because of course I listened to a lot of Indian drumming, mostly, you know. I say Indian drumming, that's like 4 or 5 drummers, each sitting around one drum with one stick and pounding the same beat and singing. It's kind of it's a response, you know, call and response kind of thing. It's beautiful and it's very effective.
On a shared drum,
on a shared drum. It's like one big, if you turned a big bass drum sideways, and there were all 4 or 5 people sitting around. And anyway, I got into the music, so I knew that music, I thought, very well. Very moved by the culture, very moved by the past, by the experiences. And then I set out to write my music, forgetting about it all.
Right.
Now I'm facing a blank page, but the influence seeped into me.
Right.
So that's...
And the intention.
That's how I work.
Right.
I'll tell you on a totally different subject.
Yeah.
Happy Days.
Yes.
When I was asked to write the music for Happy Days, now I grew up in that period of Happy Days, you know. 50s, I was in my 55. From 58, I graduated music in high school. I wasn't anywhere interested in that music in those days. I listened to classical music. I used to go to the the opera, the Metropolitan Opera, at least once a week, and stand on the side where for $2 I can stand behind the double basses and practically touch the double basses.
Right.
And I really learned a lot about orchestration that way. Although it was my orchestration teacher that suggested I do that. So I saw how the string players, the bowings were, and I could see the phrasings, and I'd hear a flute or two flutes and a clarinet, and make mental notes about that. That was my background, and then I found the jazz, and I studied with Lenny Tristano, who was one of the great jazz pianists, and then I discovered. I mean, I'm jumping way ahead, I'm sure.
It's great.
But anyway, so when I came down to getting the job for Happy Days, that was the one music I didn't know.
Right, the music of your era.
The music, and really the music of the '50s was a lot of or.
Right.
Blues. And basically, you almost take all the music of the '50s and put them to those two parts. So when I wrote Happy Days, it was Sunday, Monday, Happy Days. Tuesday, same chord structure.
Yes.
So it's kind of curious that I had to learn about the period of music that I grew up in, but I had to study it.
Yeah.
I did,
In the same way.
Yeah.
I love that your early experiences with orchestration were visual and oral and tactile. Like you put yourself in the room close to the instruments and got to experience what the sound was like in the feel. It wasn't just the theory of it.
Well, that comes also. Really, if you write for orchestras, you need to know what they can do.
Sure.
But that's book learning,
right? And
you study the range of a flute or bassoon or trumpet. Right. But then the learning of how to play it, how to write for a player. Look at the effort the trumpet player is using when he uses the high notes.
Right.
And look at the phrasing, the pauses in between, articulation of every instrument is so interesting. So then you learn to put them all together and you hear a sound. That's all pretty technical, But then it's the resonance that affects you within your body, It's how your mind hears it and perceives it.
Right.
That you get by experiencing music, Yeah, you can't learn music in a vacuum. You have to learn it in front of music.
Right.
Yeah.
When you first started studying conducting, was that through your private piano teacher, or did you really learn about conducting when you went to France?
Here's my secret. I had one conducting lesson.
One.
And he was a very fine conductor. I just learned I'll tell you what. In Paris, it's my first year in Fontainebleau Palace, and our school was in the Palace of Fontainebleau. And my teacher, Nadia Boulanger, asked those composing students if we would write pieces for what instruments we had in the school. So at that time we had 7 flutes, a string quartet, and a trumpet and a clarinet. So she said, that's what you should write for.
Make it work.
Make it work.
Right.
So I did. So now the piece was finished, and we're having a concert coming up. My piece is going to be performed. And it actually performed in what was the King's tennis court, now turned into a concert hall. So it was long and narrow.
Right.
And now, by the way, if anyone goes to Fontainebleau, it's back to being a tennis court for the local people. Yeah. But when I was there, it was a concert hall. So now I said, "Well, Mademoiselle, who's going to conduct?" She said, "Well, you will." I said, "But I don't know how." And she said, "Well, you have to learn." She said, "A composer must learn to conduct his own music."
Yeah.
So right there on the spot, I just learned by watching other people, and I never thought of conducting. Now I have passed that very word on to students that I've had. UCLA, I taught composition for 5 years. I say the same thing. I pass on to you what my teacher said to me. You must conduct your own music.
Right.
A lot of composers don't. But if you do, now you stand in front of the orchestra, and you have the ability to, first of all, tempos.
Yes.
Control them, higher, lower, more, how the articulation of the instruments, you become the conductor. So I just learned by doing.
Right.
And I conducted all my movies, my early movies. And then somehow in the late 70s, I was doing a movie called The Duchess and Darkwater Fox. And I decided I really should take some lessons. So forgive me for not remembering my teacher's name. He came to me to the studio when I was recording 20th Century Fox. He had a big orchestra. And I called him. I said, I could use help. So he came down and he watched me conduct for a day. And he said, I could help you. So he came to my house. I had one lesson, and then he moved to South America to become the conductor of the opera orchestra there. Never saw him again. But that one lesson helped me.
Apparently,
it did. No, it did help
Yeah.
me. And then, of course, you watch conductors, and if you and to be honest, when I'm conducting, I've learned how important it is how clear your beat has to be and how you give direction to people.
Right.
So now I'm quite comfortable in front of an orchestra.
Baton or hand, or depending on the music? Both. Me too.
Both, yeah. Usually, if you're working with choruses, somehow they respond better to hands,
Yeah.
you know. And orchestras, although my oratorio that I wrote for the Poland National Opera Company, based on the words of Pope John Paul II that I was asked to write.
I was reading about that.
Yeah, and so I had a 100-piece orchestra, 100-voice choir, plus 40 children's voices. So that was huge, and of course you have an orchestra. Then you need a baton, you know.
Right. Let's talk. Let's get personal for a second. I want to talk about your family. You met your wife Joan in 1961 while you were playing piano in a Latin band in the Catskill Mountains, and then the two of you got married a year later, and you've raised 3 kids. And my question is, did you jump right in and start making a family, or did you wait until your career took off?
Oh my God! You know, it's interesting. Looking back, we had through our lean years in New York, to be honest with you. So we didn't wait through lean years for years to improve. We had our first son, not long after. In the second year, we were married. I didn't know where my career was going, to be honest with you, because I was trained as a composer, a classical composer. Didn't know what I was going to accomplish, with that. I did play piano with Latin bands. I knew that was not going to be my whole career.
Did you ever consider following the path of becoming a studio pianist or a touring player?
No, I never did.
But you really love playing Latin music.
I love playing Latin music, yeah. And, I had friends who were musicians who were doing very well, playing at weddings and bar mitzvahs and things like that. I never wanted to do that.
Just wasn't.
I just didn't like the idea of playing all night, playing the same songs over,
Sure.
But it's a funny thing about careers. You don't often know where your career is going.
Right.
A lot of luck involved. A lot of, people sometimes ask me, who helped you? I had so many people along the way.
Right.
I try to do that with the other people because, people need people, People need help. And if you've gotten to someplace where you can help someone, we'll do it. Turn around and do it.
Right, that doesn't hurt you in any way.
It makes you, if it fills you with pleasure, joy to help someone to achieve in their life what you thought of achieving in your life.
And have been fortunate enough to.
Robert Russell Bennett was a great orchestrator. You may know him. He was the orchestrator for Richard Rogers. He did all the big musicals and shows, and quite a wonderful composer in his own right. He studied with Nadia Boulanger 40 years before. Aaron Copland studied with Nadia Boulanger 40 years before.
And Quincy Jones.
And Quincy Jones, yeah. And Quincy and I talk about that every time we get together.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both share those. Michel Legrand, too.
Right.
Michel Legrand, yeah.
And actually, you probably know this, but the school that I went to, Berkeley in Boston, was basically founded on the teachings of Nadia Boulanger. That whole school was developed around
I didn't even know that.
her point of view and her techniques.
Last year I was invited to speak to the school. I went to Boston.
Yeah.
And I spoke to 3 or 4 different schools. No one told me that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, no. I think Duke Ellington, however, got his first honorary doctorate or something. Is that right?
Yeah.
I seem to recall that. That's a great school, by the way.
Yeah.
Really.
For me, my experience there was I went in as a guitar player. I came out a musician.
Yeah.
It broadened me.
Do you know that Debussy referred to himself not as a composer, but as a musician? First and foremost, become a musician. Then you do what you do in music,
Since we're jumping around, which is fine, and we're speaking about classical composers, you were commissioned by Poland, the government of Poland, to compose a piece in honor of Chopin?
Yeah. The Polish government commissioned me. Actually, the Minister of Culture, who was at the time that I did the year before I did this oratorio that I just said, in Poland. I conducted the Polish National Opera Company. So the Minister of Culture then, one day over dinner before the concert, said, I've been... Vladimir Dombrowski, by the way, is... and he's become a good friend. And he said, I'd like you to consider next year is the 200th anniversary of the birth date of Chopin. I'd like you to consider writing a piece. Would you consider? I said, no, I'll do it. He said, no, I'm serious. He said, I'd like you to think about it. I said, I thought about it. I'm happy to do it. I didn't need more than that.
Right.
So I did it. So they had a great Polish pianist, and Leszek Mocda. He's a fantastic classical pianist and jazz. And I said, well, I promised Eddie...
Can you hold that thought? We're going into our first break.
Absolutely.
And I'm here with composer Charlie Fox, musician Charlie Fox, and we will be right back. So stick around.
Hey, this is Dave Koz, and you're listening to Making It with Terry Woolman.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Hi, I'm Tim Dolbear, the host of Sound Experience on Intertalk Radio. Each week, I talk with top professional audio engineers, producers, musicians, and the manufacturers that make the tools that we use in the studio each and every day. From capturing the perfect take to mastering your final release, and the tools and how the pros use them, we are going to dive deep into their process and learn from their experience. I look forward to you joining us each week on Sound Experience with me, your host, Tim Dolbear.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome back. I'm in the studio with Charlie Fox. Hi, Charlie.
Hello.
We were just in the middle of a story that I want to get back to.
Oh, good. So it was Vladimir Dombrowski, who was the Minister of Culture, also the head of the opera in Poland. And he was in charge of the 200th anniversary celebrations of Chopin. So on behalf of the government, he asked me to write a piece honoring the Chopin's birth, which was, of course, a great honor. And, to be played by a great Polish pianist, Leszek Mocda, who is very well known in Europe and perhaps even here as well. I mean, he's a fantastic classical and jazz pianist. But I'd always promised a piece to Eddie Daniels, who's a fantastic clarinetist, maybe the world's greatest jazz clarinetist, but also great classical. So I told him I'd like to write for the piano, but I'd like to add the clarinet, so it's not just too much in the footsteps of Chopin, so I can bring my own voice to it, you know. Although certainly it was somewhat influenced
and
by,
inspired by
Chopin, yeah. with an orchestra. So we had the Akusa Chamber Orchestra. And we did this in Gdansk, Poland, and it was the 30th anniversary of Solidarity. Lech Walesa was there, you know. We had 22,000 people standing in the area where Solidarity movement was.
22,000.
22,000 people,
Right.
yeah, standing. And that's quite a sight when you get on the stage and see 20 people packed in together.
Yeah.
Anyway, Marcus Miller performed on another stage with also Leszek Musa, but we did this piece. And, you know, it was a fantastic honor to be there in Poland doing that.
That's what came to mind when I read that story, was what an honor to be asked to do that.
Yeah. My father was born in Poland. And actually we've been back to visit his town of his birth and all that. I actually met with the mayor who wanted me to come back and speak to the students.
How nice.
Nice to make contact with people around the world, you know.
It is. That's one of the most wonderful things about being an artist.
It
and
is.
a musician.
We're truly blessed that way because we get, first of all, as musicians, we get to communicate with what we know how to do, which is music. And music really, you know, it's not a cliche. Music really is the international language, you know.
Yeah.
I've stood up in front of orchestras in countries I don't speak the language, you know, Japan and Poland and many countries, even Israel, where I don't speak the language. But music is the language, you know, and also
you don't remember from being bar mitzvah Hebrew?
My mother was Israeli.
Oh, she was.
Yeah, my mother's Israeli, and she never spoke to us in Hebrew, so I never learned
Got it.
Hebrew. She spoke to our sister, and that's to tell secrets, so we wouldn't know what was going on.
Our family too in Yiddish, they never taught us Yiddish.
Well, my father spoke to me in Yiddish.
He did.
From time to time when he had something important to say. He said in Yiddish. So Yiddish, I've understood. Yeah.
But so you're saying music being the international language, even if you don't speak the language, as soon as you put the baton down,
we have notes on paper. We on score paper we write how we want those notes played, what the bowing is. It's piano, it's forte, it's mezzo forte. It's Italian is the universal language of music, as you know. And the only time I couldn't actually communicate with notes was in Budapest. Every other country I've worked in, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, you know, and you can say do, mi, French. Actually, to this day, I'll tell you this. I still carry this with me. When I write notes on paper, I say them in their French terms.
You do.
Do dièse, mi bemol, fa bécard. You know, I write as I write them. I think.
Right.
I don't know.
Hear it.
I just keep it with me.
Yes.
From my student days. Yeah. That's the little conceit I have. But the one place I couldn't communicate with an orchestra, in terms of musical notation, was in Budapest. Where they have their own. It's not do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. It's fa, fi, vi, ges, gus. I can't repeat it, but I had a whole list in front of me, and of course I have translators also. You know, so music is great that way. You know, I'll tell you another cute story. I was in Venezuela once. There was a big music festival, and Norman Gimbel and I were there, invited to write a song, and. There's a big orchestra, big pop orchestra, like maybe 50 or some musicians or something, and it was on the opera stage, and the musicians were kind of layered up in the air, you know. And when you stand in front of an orchestra, you don't recognize individual people. It could be a best friend. You're not going to notice. You see a sea of violins.
Right.
So I started to conduct. There was a translator. I don't speak Spanish. The translator and the band wasn't with me, so I asked them to stop. And I asked the translator, could you tell them we're going to begin again? Again, they weren't with me. So now he leans over to me, and I stop it again. He says, you have to excuse our drummer. He's way up there, and he doesn't see very well. So now I look up in the air, and I see a drummer who looks familiar to me. He looks like a guy that I played in the band with many years before with Randy Carlos's band. Where he played timbales. And now it turns out he's the big jazz drummer in Venezuela. So I look up in the air and I said, Frankie? And he takes off his glasses and he looks and says, Charlie?
Charlie?
And he comes running down all the stairs. He gives me a big hug. And then he turns around and says, I don't know what he said in Spanish, but he yelled it out, and they never played so beautifully before. They were right with me the whole time. I made the connection.
Right. It's definitely nice to have somebody on your team.
Absolutely. I started to tell you before, by the way, if I may go back to a story about people helping people.
Yes.
So Robert Russell Bennett was one of the great orchestrators, a great composer, and studied Boulanger as I did. I called him when I was beginning my career and didn't know which way my career is going. I didn't really, now we have a wife and a child, and I'm playing in bands and not earning enough money, really, and writing arrangements. And I wasn't a songwriter. I never thought of myself as a songwriter, to be honest.
Oh, I'm surprised.
Never thought of it. No, I didn't. I came to songwriting quite by accident. But I wrote Latin songs, for those bands. And my earliest songs actually were in Spanish. I work with Spanish lyricists, and that music came easy to me.
Right, and you made a charanga album.
I did.
When I
was 22 years old, I had my first Latin album, all Spanish songs. Johnny Pacheco, the great flute player, played for me. I had some of the guys from Tito Puente's band, and actually, if you want to know, that record was re-released a few years ago.
No kidding.
And I still hear from people. I had an interview the other day from Colombia. They still play it on the radio.
Beautiful.
Colombia, the country. Anyway, so I called Robert Russell Bennett, and I said, I'm such and such. And he said, well, why don't you come down and see me? So I went to his office, and he was really nice. He said, well, what can you show me that you've written in pop music that I could recommend you? I said, really nothing. I had written Latin songs. I said, but I'll write something. So I wrote like a theater suite in the style of West Side Story, which to me was as close as I was going to get to
Latin.
or the pop world, even though it's far from that.
Yes.
But I wasn't into pop songs or pop arrangements. I didn't know a thing about rock and roll music, not a thing. So I wrote this theater suite, and I fully orchestrated, and I brought it back about a week later, and I guess he was impressed. And he offered to help me. So he said, let me see what I can do, and I'll call you back. And within a couple of weeks, he called me back, and he said, I have two possibilities for you. This is strange. I didn't know him. Just reached out for me. He said, there's a school, I think it's in Vermont, Bennington. I think it was a girls' school. And he said,
it is,
you could be the composer in residence and assistant teacher. Or I spoke to Skitch Henderson, who's a well-known band leader, composer,
Original Tonight Show.
This was just before the Tonight Show.
Before the Tonight Show,
Tonight Show. He said, Skitch is willing to meet with you. So I said, well, I never thought of myself as a teacher. I just come back from Paris studying with the most extraordinary teacher.
Right.
So I said, Skitch would be great. Thank you. So he introduced us. I went to Skitch's house. He was really nice to me, and he started using me as an orchestrator, arranger. If I did a piece of music, he'd put into a film. Sometimes if he needed an extra pianist in the recording session, he'd ask me. I'd play a keyboard for him or something. He really kind of took me under his wing, really. So how nice is that? These are all strangers,
it's
right?
Beautiful.
So then when the Tonight Show started, he got the job as the musical director, as you know. And he said that he had to take his phone number was listed before that. He said, because people call him, say, the Skitch Show, what time's the show start tonight? He said he had a listed number. So he had his own recording studio called Studio 3 at 57th Street, 3rd Avenue. And that's where I made some of my early records at that studio. As an engineer named David Saucer. That's where I made my charanga record for the first time. And I started to... So then when Skitch was doing the show, every now and then he'd do a piano solo with the band behind him, and he'd ask me to do that arrangement.
Right.
And then he asked me to write some station break material, not the main theme. Station break. Bumpers. When the show went on off the air, the band would play bad, whatever it was. So I started writing original songs for him, orchestrating for the Tonight Show band. So one thing led to another, and really that was a really good start. I mean, there's a lot of starts,
Well, how does that lead to writing? I know this was your second film and not your first, but becoming the composer for Barbarella. First of all, I had done a lot of short films. Okay. I did a lot of documentaries. Okay. So when I started to get busy, I was at a choice because did I want to do rock and roll? And I got into rock and roll. Yeah. I did. And got to like it, by the way, very much, and a good part of my career was with that also. Yeah, that's really obvious from listening to all of your TV themes that you really have a connection with that you enjoyed it. You found a way to love that. I do.
people say to me, how come you write so many different things? I said, I haven't found what I like the best.
I'm still looking.
I'm still looking, yeah. And I had a friend, Ed Newmark, in New York. He was the president of a record company, Audio Fidelity. And he said to me, why don't you learn to do rock and roll arrangements? You can make money. So I started listening to rock and roll records on the radio. But then if I had a choice of that or I did a lot of commercials. If I had a choice of doing that or a film, a short film, I always gravitated to the film because that was original music. Right. You know. So I started doing films for the USIA, U.S. Information Agency, documentaries, short documentaries. And one of my first was for the 1964, so I was 24 years old, for the World's Fair. For the Kodak exhibit, I did a 10-minute film. And
which I must have seen when I was a kid because I went to the World's Fair.
You may have. Yeah. And then coincidentally, I played at that World's Fair at the Caribbean Pavilion as a pianist, wearing rumba shirts, ruffled sleeves with Ray Barretto's band.
That's what I was picturing.
So in that music that I wrote for this Kodak, there was one section that was going to have needed electronic impulses. And that wasn't my thing. I didn't know how to do that. Right. So they hired another guy who was a photographer, but had like an electronic machine that produced notes, and by tape manipulation back and forth, he was able to make that work. Right. So then I thought, well, why don't I do that? You know. So that's when I went to Columbia.
Oh, and started studying electronic music.
Ussachevsky, yeah. Okay. So Ussachevsky is one of the leaders. He and Ussachevsky and I forgot now. I'm sorry, I forgot.
It's all right.
Two men who really started music concrete, electronic music. And Ussachevsky was the teacher. And Columbia University, it was Columbia Princeton, had a laboratory on the campus of Columbia. It was one of only 5 in the whole world that produced electronic music. There was 2 in Germany, in Darmstadt and Cologne. There's one in Israel, the Radio Diffusion Radio Diffusion in Paris, and with this one. And the first music computer was on 125th Street, also about that same thing.
First music computer.
Music computer,
right.
Yes. You'd put a little program, like remember the old IBM cards? You'd put it in, they come out like that. Anyway, so I enrolled in Columbia to study with Ussachevsky. I was with him for a year. And I won't go through that whole process, but there was no synthesizer invented yet. Yeah. So this was all, you record sounds from electronic generators. And then, according to the individual notes that you've recorded, that with
the oscillators and filters, then you'd splice them together. And we had a big chart. This is before computers, right? That said, if you're in the speed of 15 or 7.5 inches per second, a quarter note. If you're at the 100 metronome setting, a quarter note is an inch, right? Or 3/4 or whatever. So then you cut into little bits and pieces, tape it all up on a splicing block. And you'd have it, that took an hour. That's right.
And then from there, you'd put it on a loop around the room. Right. And you'd send it through ring modulators, through echo chambers, through all kinds of devices. And that was for one sound. That if you wanted stereo, you needed to do the same thing in sync. Yeah. Or 4-track with 4. Anyway, it was very complicated. But people came, great composers came from around there. Stockhausen came from Germany. David Husky used to work there. The studio was in use 24 hours a day. So when the first synthesizer came out, the first voltage-controlled keyboard by Moog, I jumped on it. And I bought the first huge Moog, one of the first huge Moog synthesizers, called the Moog 3. Right. I bought it from Robert Moog.
From Robert, you're right, himself. Yeah.
Himself. And although he wasn't him that delivered it, but it was so new that he hadn't come around to having instructions yet on how to work it.
Right. I think it was you, Stevie Wonder, and Herbie Hancock had the other two
very possibly. Yeah. Very possibly. So I got into that, we're talking about 1965, 66, early on.
I want to ask you, from an arranging point of view, and this goes back to Barbarella, but also your
I'm sorry, I love
No, I love this. I love that there's so much to talk about with you. And I'm fascinated by your stories. But you were talking about your new love for writing for rock and pop and rhythm section, which is not, wasn't your wheelhouse originally. Right. And the opening scene of Barbarella was basically a futuristic striptease. And it also had about 2 minutes. I went back to listen to it. It had about 2 minutes of intro before the vocal came in, before there was any lyric.
Right.
So it was score, but setting the tone and the feel for the music. But you didn't do the obvious, feel-wise. And I'm wondering what influenced your decision on coming up with a feel for the opening theme?
First of all, I'll tell you something very nice. Barbarella has never had a second record release until just now.
Uh-huh.
And they just released the picture disc. Jane Fonda had one of the pictures from those days.
Yes.
And beautiful picture disc. And they're coming out with an album now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And a CD should be released on Vera Saraband any minute. Mm-hmm. And actually, I just got a letter today approving what I had written about it. So that's really nice. It sounds wonderful, by the way.
Oh, it does?
Fresh, yeah. I can't wait for that record to come. People have asked me for years.
We're heading into our next break right now. So when we come back, I want to get the rest of the answer about how you came up with that point of view. And also, I really want to hear you play, and I've got some questions, some selfish questions about.
Let me tell it this.
Yeah. We will be right back with my guest, Charlie Fox. Stick around.
Hey everybody, this is Phil Perry. Stay tuned for another portion of Making It with Terry Woolman.
This is Tim Dolbear, host of Sound Experience here on Intertalk Radio. And Source Connect by Source Element is the essential tool that we use to link between my studio in Austin, Texas and the WS radio station in San Diego. Now with Source Connect, not only can we communicate in real time and with HD audio, but it's synced up and is of a high enough quality that I can use it for real-time ADR work, remote recording and overdubbing, and it even allows me to remotely control a DAW. Source Connect by Source Element. Affordable, high-quality audio and video connection over the internet for all of your production needs.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome back. I'm here in the studio with Charlie Fox, and I'm having so much fun talking with you. Thanks again for inviting me.
I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
Yeah. I have a lot I want to ask you. This is our last of the three segments. So we were just talking about Barbarella, and then I'm going to do some like speed dating with some quicker questions, so I can get some ask you a few things I selfishly want to know. But you were talking about the Barbarella theme, and
try to make it fast then.
Yeah.
I'd done one picture called The Incident. It was a very dramatic film. My first picture with Larry Pierce, one of the great directors. I had just finished an album that Bob Crewe asked me to do. And you know who Bob Crewe was.
Yes.
He, among other things, put together the Four Seasons, co-wrote all their hits, and produced the records. He was a huge record industry person. And I was fortunate enough to get to meet him, and he said he always wanted to do an album that combined pop music and classical music and Latin and jazz. And he had a pianist that was great. Would I like to do that and make it about you take the essences of pieces that were classical and do what you will with them. I mean, that was a dream assignment. Anyway, the pianist he had didn't work out, but I asked a friend, Ben Lanzarone, who did all those things magnificently. And so we formed a really good kind of collaboration with Ben and myself and Bob. That album turned out really extremely well. Bob was a fantastic producer. I learned everything I know about producing records from Bob Crewe.
No kidding.
Yeah. So then he got the job to do Barbarella. There was a score by an Italian composer that they threw out. It was a spoof on the space age.
Sci-fi.
Sci-fi thing. He got, and he did because his record company was involved with Dot, which was Paramount Pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So he took the job. He was a songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
But we had just worked together. It involved a big orchestra. I had just finished my first picture.
Right.
What I was not was a songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted to do about 5 or 6 new songs. And he hired me to score the picture and said, you and I'll write the songs. I said, okay. And that was it. So
right, you were smart enough to say yes to that.
I've said this many times. I never got anywhere in my life by saying no. It's only yes that leads to something.
Yes, I would agree with
it's
that.
It's easy to say no, but it's better to say yes, So I said, sure. So then he rented a house out in Southampton. Mm-hmm. It was actually Edward Albee's house for the summer.
Right.
And I would start to go back and forth working. And eventually, my son, Robbie, at that time, was small, and my wife, we moved out for the summer. Mm-hmm. And we wrote all the Barbarella songs. And then I came back and I did the score after. So that opening of that show, first of all, as a composer, you follow the picture.
Right. So
the film dictates what you need to do to convey a mood.
Right.
I will tell you that, and maybe young composers listening to this might wonder, no director has ever told me what I should write.
Yeah, that's been remarkable. I read a quote of you saying that, and that's kind of unique.
I've done 100 pictures.
Yes.
No director ever said, here's what I'd like you to write. And if they did, you have to interpret that.
Right.
I could tell you that with The Love Boat. Aaron Spelling asked me to write something like the beginning of Murder on the Orient Express. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that's a waltz. Mm-hmm. He said, that's what I want, something like that. You could show the excitement of the train ticket.
Right.
And I wrote a disco called Love Boat.
Right.
He said, great.
Right. So you're not very good at taking direction, is that right?
No, but yes, I believe me.
Of course you are.
Directors and producers, I listen to what they say.
Yeah.
But in the end, they rely on me to bring out what I think, or get someone else.
Right.
Yeah. I say me, I mean the composer. They rely on the composer.
But you do listen, you take it all in, and then you do what feels right.
You do what you feel you should do.
Yeah.
And never shy away from what you think is the right way to go.
Right.
Even though, I'll just say this again to young composers, even though you may be nervous, it's not going to sound good, not going to work, go with your instincts.
Right.
So Barbarella had an opening with Jane Fonda stripping in space, basically.
Right.
And some letters came flying in space. It was very innovative for the time.
It was.
And so I didn't begin the song until the letters started flying out.
Right.
So it's all intro, and I didn't play sci-fi music at all. Although we used electronic equipment.
Right.
I had a big orchestra, and I gave it a rhythmic beat, like a pop beat.
Right.
We had this group called the Glitter House that sang it. Bob Crewe produced it. We wrote all the songs together.
Right.
So now I'll tell you the last little thing about this was on this. We finished the picture. Very happy collaboration. The picture became a big hit. When I moved out to California, my next picture called Goodbye Columbus. A big picture of Barbarella, poster on a wall of Paramount Pictures with my name on it. Really kind of thing makes you feel very welcome. As a young composer. Yeah. So,
although you were a young composer,
I was 26. Yeah. So then they needed Jane to hum along with our title song. It's been shot while as an overdub while she's stripping in space.
Right.
So I had not the unhappy experience of going to France to teach Jane Fonda how to sing the song.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So Vadim and the director, Roger Vadim, and Jane had a house in the countryside, had a little farmhouse. So they sent a car for me, and I went there, and I was with them for the weekends, And I taught her how to sing. She was pregnant with her daughter at that time. She was very lovely, very welcoming. So was Vadim.
That's great.
So that was a pretty good gig, as you said.
Yeah, I would say so.
That was my job to teach her my song.
Would you? Thanks for answering that question. Yeah. Would you indulge me and play a couple of your TV themes and
TV themes?
Yeah.
Okay. This is this is my first one that I did in California. I did the pilot after I did Goodbye Columbus. They asked me to stay around for a pilot of a new show they thought could work, and it was on the air for a number of years, and it went, love, 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 American style, truer than the red, white, and blue, love, American style, that's me and you, and on a star-spangled night, my love, You can rest your head on my shoulder, while by the dawn's early light, my love, I will defend your right to try. Love, American style, that's me and you.
Beautiful.
So
you had Love American Style. You from 1974 to 1983. You had 4 hit television shows running simultaneously: Happy Days, Wonder Woman, Laverne and Shirley, and The Love Boat.
Yeah.
I want to play a couple of little samples of those, and then I have a question for you.
Happy Days was originally Paramount. ABC loved Love American Style because there were 3 short segments, each with its own beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
So they would put pilots into their episodes.
Mm-hmm.
One of the pilots was Love in the Happy Days, and they didn't think the world was ready for the 50s yet.
Right.
So it wasn't until American Graffiti came out that it was a big hit that they decided to pull it out with Ron Howard, who was in the anyway. So that was Sunday, Monday, Happy Days; Tuesday, Wednesday, Happy Days; Thursday, Friday, Happy Days; Saturday, what a day, rocking all week with you. These days are ours, happy and free. These happy days are yours and mine. These happy days are yours and mine. Happy days. And then one day they brought in 2 girls as love interests for the Fonz and Richie.
Right.
And their names were Laverne and Shirley. And they got such response from people writing in and calling in. They decided, let's do a Gary Marshall, the genius, you know. Dear Gary, who passed away recently.
Yes.
He was a comedy genius, a wonderful, wonderful man. And a good friend to a lot of people.
Yes.
He's talking about people who helped people.
Right.
This was a remarkable man. So he put together a quick pilot. It wasn't even a pilot. It was just a little presentation. But they always believed, which you don't see now, they believed him and Eddie Milkis and Tom Miller, who were the producers, that you do a proper main title.
Right.
It looks like a new show. It sounds like a new show. Sounds like now they don't even do that. You know, you turn on television series, there's no main titles. It's 10
right.
seconds.
It's not melodically driven or thematically driven.
So not knowing much about the people we wrote, give us any chance, we'll take it. Read us any rule, we'll break it. We're gonna make our dreams come true. Doing it our way, there is nothing we won't try. Never heard the word impossible this time. There's no stopping us. We're gonna do it on your markets. And then I wrote a song that was Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman. All the world is waiting for you. And the promise you can rest in your satin tights, fighting for your rights, and the old red, white, and blue. Love.
Yeah.
Exciting and new. Come aboard. We're expecting you. The Love Boat. Soon we'll be making another run. The Love Boat promises something for everyone. Kiss of search or adventure, your mind on a new romance. And love won't hurt anymore.
Yeah.
It's an open smile on a friendly shore. Welcome aboard, it's love. Welcome aboard, it's love.
Thank you for doing that. It's really fun for me because, of course, I watch those shows as we all did, and the music spoke to me. You know, when when I heard those themes come on, I knew that the show was getting ready. But there was something, and the something really was the melody. You know, that I think that really spoke to me as a young musician as well. I didn't realize it, but sitting across from you now and hearing these again, the themes were always really unique and strong and still hold. So here's my question for you: 4 hit shows running simultaneously, and not only were you writing the themes, but you were scoring some of them as well.
Scoring a lot. What I really did is I started them off Love American Song, I did all the episodes.
Okay.
Over 5 years.
Right.
All the others, I basically started, do a library, do a few
You created
episodes.
the song. And then did they reuse your library?
Well, they reused my library.
Right.
I
You created the sound.
shows to other composers.
Right.
I just really walked away.
Yeah.
Because I created a library and a sound and a concept, and they stayed with it.
Right.
And my theme, of course.
Yeah. But because I couldn't imagine how you could possibly get all of that writing done. It's so much time. It's so much time to do that. Let me ask you a couple very quick questions and short answers. We only got about 5 more minutes for our show.
Let's talk fast.
When I know that you still write scores by hand, so do I, and I just wonder the tactile aspect of putting pencil to paper. Why is that so important to you?
Oh, first of all, it's how I think.
Me too.
It's how I think. When I hear notes, I think of my head. I hear the corresponding. I hear the harmonies, the counterpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go to my computer to play it.
Right.
I go to my pencil to put it down on paper.
Yeah. So
that's
how
I think.
And
then when I turn things into scores, my scores I do it in pen.
Yeah.
And I like the way things line up from the top to the bottom, and it looks nice. And it's
strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words. What's the story on how you wrote "Killing Me Softly"? And the short story. And I'm sorry to
Norman Gimbel and I were working on an album for New Artist.
Mm-hmm.
We had 9 songs in the can. We had developed this artist over a number of months for Capitol Records, and we had 9 songs. They loved it, and they wanted to release the album. They said, fellas, we need a song real fast. So we're sitting around the piano one day. I was at the piano, Norman's standing, and he has a book of lyric thoughts, song titles that he refers to.
Right.
So he's looking through the book and said, what do you think about Killing Me Softly with his blues?
Oh, blues. Mm-hmm.
And said, well, Killing Me Softly sounds interesting, but the blues sounds like an old-fashioned word,
right.
In 1972 or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he thought, and he said, what about Killing Me Softly with a song? Song about how we feel about being moved about songs when we hear singers sing them.
Mm-hmm.
I said, that sounds good, Norman. That sounds good.
Yeah.
So he went home. He called me about an hour or two later. I wrote down the lyrics like this with the phone tucked under my ear, and I went right to my piano.
Right. Yeah.
And before the end of the day, we had a song. So that's just one thing
right.
that came that quickly. By the way, they don't all come that quickly.
Yes.
I can sometimes work for weeks on a song.
I've 2 more questions for you, and it's so frustrating to keep it short, but you also wrote the score for 1977. Actually, you worked on a score called 100 Voices, A Journey Home, a documentary with our friend Danny Gold and Matthew Asner.
Right.
You went to Europe to do that?
We went together.
Yeah.
We toured. Actually, Nate Lamb, a dear friend of ours,
cantor.
Was a cantor. He's the president of the Cantor Assembly. Brought 100 cantors back to Poland to do concerts all over Poland. Mm-hmm. It was the birthplace of cantorial music,
right?
And it died there in the war. Warsaw had 400 synagogues, and now they have 2.
Mm.
So obviously, that's the story, the tragic story we all know. So Nate wanted to bring cantorial music back in a major way. Mm-hmm. He was the one who asked me to write that oratorio based on the words of Pope John Paul II.
Right.
So Pope John Paul II was the first. Well, it's the first pope who actually went to Israel, and he put these words that I set to music in the wall, and they're words of hope and peace and apologies for what happened. So he wrote them in English.
Right.
I had them translated into Hebrew and Polish, and we did that there. So on that trip, first of all, we were invited by the Polish government, about 10 of us, before this big trip.
Right.
Danny was on that trip. Matt was on that trip. Matt, as you say. And we were about 10 of us. And it was a Consul General Poland. We toured us around. We came back then with 300 people and 100 cantors.
Right.
And we did concerts in Krakow. We did concerts in Warsaw. And anyway, it was a wonderful part of my life.
It's a profoundly moving documentary. I encourage
It was
everybody
very moving,
to
very
watch it. We'll put a
movie.
link up to that along with the show.
That would be great. Yeah,
We
Daddy
have
made a beautiful film.
We have a minute left, and so my final question that I ask all of my guests, which I know you could speak about for an hour, but at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, that's an interesting question. My younger self. I mean, I think my younger self always knew that I had to do what I had to do. So I would say just what I did. Just do what you have to do. You want to be a composer? You want to devote your life to music? Do it. And don't let anything stop you.
Right.
If you need to make a living, so you do something else. But you write your music. I think I've pursued a path that I meant to pursue. And I would encourage my young self to pursue the same path. And by the way, I encourage every young person to do that. You have a dream, you have a notion, you have a thought of something you want to do. You can picture yourself being a whatever it is, a composer or a politician or a lawyer or a doctor. Pursue what your inner dream is, because then it takes you to good places.
Thank you, Charlie Fox. Really a pleasure to spend the hour with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.